My brother planned his anniversary party on my graduation day, but everyone celebrated me instead. For as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my perfect older brother, Eric. The golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the successful entrepreneur with a picture-perfect wife and the house in the suburbs that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. And then there was me, Lena Matthews, the afterthought. I used to think it was all in my head, that the way my parents' eyes lit up when Eric walked into a room but merely acknowledged my presence was just my imagination. That the way they hung on his every word at family dinners while barely asking about my life was just coincidence. That the way my childhood bedroom had been converted into a home gym the moment I left for college, while Eric's remained untouched like a shrine, was just practicality. But on that Tuesday afternoon in April, sitting at my parents' kitchen island clutching a mug of rapidly cooling coffee, I couldn't deny it anymore. "So, Mom, Dad," I began, my heart fluttering with excitement I couldn't contain, "I have some news." My father grunted from behind his newspaper. My mother offered a distracted, as she arranged flowers in a vase, white roses, Eric's wife Jessica's favorite. I got the date for my graduation ceremony, June 10th. I beamed, waiting for their reaction. After 6 grueling years, I was finally finishing my doctorate in clinical psychology. First in my class, the only student selected for the prestigious Harmon Fellowship. I'd struggled through panic attacks before exams, worked 3 jobs to help pay tuition, and sacrificed any semblance of a social life. But it had been worth it. I'd done it. The silence stretched for 1 beat. 2. 3. My mother's hands stilled on the roses. My father's newspaper lowered slightly. June 10th. My mother's voice had a strange edge to it. "Yeah," I said, my smile faltering. "It's a Saturday. I thought maybe we could all go out to dinner after?" Or, my father and mother exchanged a look, the kind of married for 30 years telepathic communication that needs no words. "Sweetheart," my mother began, setting down the scissors she'd been using on the flowers, "that's the day of Eric and Jessica's anniversary party." I blinked, trying to process her words. Their anniversary party? But their anniversary is in July. July 15th, my father supplied helpfully, folding his newspaper and setting it aside. But Jessica's parents are traveling then, and Eric wanted to make sure they could be there. It's their 5th anniversary, you know. A milestone. A milestone, I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We've been planning it for months. Eric rented that beautiful venue downtown, the Glass Garden, and Jessica's been working with a caterer on a custom menu. They're even flying in a band from Nashville that played at their wedding." Each word was like a small dagger. Months of planning. A beautiful venue. Custom menu. Live music. But I struggled to find words that wouldn't make me sound like a petulant child. But it's my graduation, from my doctorate program, that I've been working toward for 6 years. My father reached across the island and patted my hand in what I'm sure he thought was a comforting gesture. "And we're very proud of you, Pumpkin. Very proud. But this party has been in the works since January. Deposits have been paid. Invitations sent. Over 100 people are coming. I'm sure your ceremony won't take all day," my mother added brightly. "You can come to the party afterward. We'll save you some cake." Save me some cake. Like I was an 8-year-old who had to go to bed before dessert. I looked between their faces, expectant, already moved on from my news, already thinking about Eric's party, and something inside me shifted. A tectonic plate of resentment that had been building pressure for 28 years finally ruptured. "No," I said quietly. My mother tilted her head. "No what, dear?" "No, I won't come by later." "No, I won't accept being an afterthought." Again. My voice remained steady, but my hands were shaking. I curled them into fists under the countertop. My parents exchanged another look, this one tinged with confusion and mild alarm. "Lena," my father began in his problem-solving voice, "don't be dramatic. It's unfortunate timing, but these things happen. We can celebrate your graduation another day." Another day. Always another day, for Lena. always the main event for Eric. The memory of my 16th birthday flashed in my mind, canceled at the last minute because Eric had made the finals of a tennis tournament. My high school graduation, my parents leaving early because Eric had called with big news about his first real estate deal. My acceptance to the doctorate program, barely acknowledged at dinner because Eric and Jessica had just announced they were buying their dream house. A lifetime of being second choice crystallized in that moment, hardening into a resolve I never felt before. "You know what?" I said, sliding off the bar stool and grabbing my bag. "Don't worry about it. Don't come to my graduation. Don't save me cake. Don't." My voice caught, but I pushed through. "Don't pretend anymore that I matter as much to you as Eric does. At least be honest about that." "Lena," my mother gasped. "That's not fair." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Not fair? You want to talk to me about what's not fair?" My father stood up, his face reddening. "You need to calm down. You're being childish and selfish. Your brother has a life, responsibilities. And I don't." I cut him off. "I've worked just as hard. I've achieved just as much. But you've never seen it, have you?" The truth hung in the air between us, too raw and real for them to deny, but too painful for them to acknowledge. I turned and walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. "Enjoy the party. I'm sure it will be perfect, just like everything else about Eric's charmed life." I didn't wait for their response. Didn't wait for the half-hearted placations or the thinly veiled accusations of jealousy they'd no doubt offer. Instead, I walked out into the spring sunshine, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to just take it. Something had to change. And if my family wasn't going to value me, then maybe it was time I showed them exactly what they were missing. "He did what?" Ava's voice echoed through her small apartment, bouncing off exposed brick walls and causing her cat, Biggie, to startle awake and glare at us from his perch on the bookshelf. The remains of our impromptu takeout dinner, Thai food cartons and half-empty wine glasses, were scattered across her coffee table. I sank deeper into Ava's worn leather couch, exhaustion finally catching up with me. After leaving my parents' house, I'd driven around aimlessly for hours, eventually finding myself at Ava's door. My best friend since sophomore year of college, Ava was the only person who truly understood the dynamic with my family. "They've been planning this anniversary party for Eric and Jessica for months," I said, my voice hollow. "Apparently, over 100 people are coming. Live band from Nashville.
Custom menu.
The works." Ava tucked a strand of her vibrant purple hair behind her ear, her dark eyes narrowing. "And they knew about your graduation date?" "I told them last semester, when I found out I was on track to finish. I reminded them in January. I picked at a loose thread on my jeans. But they forgot. Or didn't care enough to remember. Take your pick. And they just expect you to show up at his party after your ceremony? Like some kind of afterthought." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump forming in my throat. "My mom actually said they'd save me some cake." Ava's jaw clenched. "That's it. I've had it with your family's bullshit." She grabbed my hands, her rings cool against my skin. "Listen to me, Lena. You are brilliant. You worked your ass off for this degree. 6 years of your life. Do you know how many people drop out of doctoral programs? But you didn't. You excelled." Her fierce defense made my eyes burn with unshed tears. "Meanwhile," she continued, "what did Eric do? Got a business degree his parents paid for, then used their connections to start his self-made real estate career." She made air quotes with her fingers. "And now they're throwing him this extravagant party while treating your incredible achievement like an inconvenience." Put like that, the injustice of it seemed even more stark. "You deserve better than this, Lena," Ava said, eyes blazing with anger. "And it's not just about this one event. It's about your whole life. They've always put him first, and it's not right." She was right. I did deserve better. And a lifetime of swallowing my disappointment, of making myself small to accommodate Eric's enormity in my parents' eyes, suddenly felt intolerable. "So, what am I supposed to do?" I asked, reaching for my wine glass. Not go to my own graduation out of spite? Go to their stupid party and pretend it doesn't hurt. A slow smile spread across Ava's face, the kind that reminded me why people often underestimated her. Behind her artistic appearance and easygoing demeanor was a tactical mind that had gotten us both out of countless jams over the years. Or, she said, leaning forward, option 3. Make sure Eric's party doesn't go as planned. Something electric sparked in my chest. What do you mean? I mean, Ava said, reaching for her phone, that sometimes the universe needs a little help delivering karma. She scrolled through her contacts before holding up the screen triumphantly. Remember my ex, Marcus? He works for Elite Events now, the same company that handles all the fancy venues downtown, including the Glass Garden. My heart beat faster. You think he'd tell you about Eric's party details? Better. Her smile widened. He owes me a favor. A big one. I helped him land that job after covering for him when he messed up a huge installation at the gallery. She started typing rapidly, her fingers flying over the screen. And my cousin Danny? She just got promoted to assistant manager at Civic Catering. Guess who's handling the food for Eric and Jessica's big day? My mind raced with possibilities, both terrifying and exhilarating. Ava, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, she replied innocently. I'm simply pointing out that we have access to information. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. For a moment, I hesitated. The good daughter, the responsible sister, the ethical, almost psychologist in me knew this was wrong. But another part, the part that had been dismissed and overlooked for 28 years, was already calculating possibilities. I don't want to destroy his party, I said slowly. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to know what it's like when your special moment gets overshadowed. Ava nodded, understanding in her eyes. Not destruction, just disruption. Enough to make a point. She refilled our wine glasses, a conspiratorial gleam in her eye. So, Dr. Matthews, almost what's it going to be? Another night of being the forgotten sister, or your long overdue moment in the spotlight? I took the glass, a plan already forming in my mind. Not malicious destruction, but strategic chaos. Just enough to make my family realize what they'd done. Let's do it, I said, surprising myself with a conviction in my voice.
But we need to be smart about this.
No obvious sabotage. Nothing that comes back to us. Ava grinned, raising her glass in a toast. To the sweet taste of justice. Our glasses clinked, the sound ringing with promise. Here's what we know so far, Ava said, grabbing a notebook from her coffee table. The party is at the Glass Garden. Marcus can get us the full event schedule, vendor list, and floor plan. Danny can tell us exactly what's being served and who's working the event. She started sketching out a rough timeline. The key is creating a series of small accidents that individually seem like bad luck, but collectively create the perfect storm. I finished, a strange mix of guilt and anticipation churning in my stomach. As Ava outlined our infiltration points, I had a sudden realization. For once, I wasn't going to be the afterthought. For once, I wasn't going to fade into the background of Eric's spotlight. For once, I was going to write my own story, and the ending would be spectacular. The Glass Garden lived up to its name. Sunlight streamed through the vaulted glass ceiling, casting prism-like rainbows across white marble floors. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls above elegantly arranged tables. White roses, Jessica's favorite, adorned every surface, their subtle fragrance permeating the air. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of event my parents would move heaven and earth to attend, even if it meant missing their daughter's doctoral graduation. I smoothed down the emerald green dress Ava had insisted I wear. If you're going to crash a party, do it in style. Took a deep breath and stepped into the reception area where guests were mingling. Lena. My mother spotted me immediately, her face a mixture of surprise and relief. She hurried over, champagne flute in hand. You came. I wasn't sure you would after. Well, you know. I wouldn't miss Eric's special day, I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. How was the ceremony? She asked, at least having the decency to remember where I'd been.
Brief.
Unmemorable. Nothing special. The lie slipped out easily. In reality, there had been no ceremony today. My graduation was still weeks away. But they didn't know that. They hadn't bothered to verify the date I'd mentioned, too consumed with Eric's celebration. Well, I'm glad you're here now. She linked her arm through mine, guiding me toward the main hall. Everyone's just arrived. Dinner service starts in 20 minutes. Perfect timing. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A text from Ava. Eagle has landed. Operation Karma in motion. I suppressed a smile. Ava had insisted on using ridiculous code names for everything, embracing the spy movie absurdity of our scheme. Eagle was Danny, her cousin on the catering staff, who had been more than happy to help after hearing how my family had treated me. Lena. Eric's booming voice cut through the ambient chatter. My brother approached, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine in his tailored suit. Jessica trailed behind him, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. You made it. He pulled me into a hug that smelled of expensive cologne and privilege. How was the graduation thing? The graduation thing. 6 years of my life reduced to a thing. It was fine, I said, stepping back from his embrace. Congratulations on your anniversary. 5 years. Jessica chimed in, flashing her enormous diamond ring as if I might have forgotten it existed. Can you believe it? Hardly seems possible, I replied with practiced sincerity. Everything looks amazing. Mom and Dad really went all out, Eric said, beaming. The band is from Nashville, you know. Played at our wedding. So I heard. A server approached with a tray of champagne. I recognized him as one of Danny's colleagues. Part of our plan. He offered the tray first to Eric and Jessica. Sir, madam, our special reserve for the guests of honor. They each took a glass, and I carefully selected one as well, making sure to take from the specific side of the tray we'd arranged with Danny. To 5 incredible years, Eric toasted, clinking his glass against Jessica's, and to many more. They sipped. I watched over the rim of my own glass as Jessica's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. This champagne tastes different, she said, examining her glass. Eric frowned, taking another sip. It's not the Cristal we ordered. I believe it's the Dom Perignon Rose, sir, the server said smoothly. As requested by your event planner this morning. We didn't request a change, Jessica said, her perfect brow furrowing. Eric, did you? No, I didn't. My brother's jaw tightened, the first hint of his evening beginning to unravel. Find the event planner. Now. The server nodded and disappeared into the crowd. I hid my smile behind my glass. The champagne swap was just the first tiny domino to fall, a minor annoyance that no one would think twice about. But combined with what was coming next, ladies and gentlemen, the event host's voice rang out through the room. Please make your way to your designated tables. Dinner service will begin momentarily. My parents appeared at Eric's side, my father clapping him on the shoulder. Everything all right, son? You look troubled. Nothing major, Eric said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Just a mix-up with the champagne. I'm sure it's nothing, my mother soothed, ever the peacemaker when it came to Eric's concerns. Let's get seated. They've put us at the head table, of course. She turned to me almost as an afterthought. Lena, you're at table 3 with your cousins from Portland. Of course I was. Not the family table. Not even close. Perfect, I said, spotting my assigned table across the room. I'll catch up with you later. As I made my way through the crowd, I glanced at my watch. According to our timeline, the first major accident should happen in approximately 5 minutes, right as the appetizers were being served. I settled into my seat at table 3, nodding politely to distant relatives I barely recognized. My phone vibrated again. Kitchen chaos confirmed. Sound system rigged. Cake situation problematic but manageable. Proceed to phase 2? I typed back quickly, green light. From my vantage point, I could see the servers emerging from the kitchen, balancing trays of what should have been delicate scallop ceviche, the appetizer Jessica had spent weeks deciding on. Instead, Thanks to a miscommunication with the kitchen, they were carrying something entirely different. The first hint that something was wrong came when Aunt Meredith, known for her seafood allergy, gasped at the neighboring table. "There must be some mistake," she said loudly to her server. "I was assured there would be a non-seafood option." "This is the non-seafood option, ma'am," the server replied, looking genuinely confused. "It's spicy tofu larb." A ripple of confusion spread through the room as more guests received their appetizers. Some got seafood when they'd requested vegetarian. Others received dishes so spicy they had to reach for water after one bite. At the head table, I watched as Jessica's face flushed crimson. She whispered urgently to Eric, who signaled frantically for the event manager. I sipped my water, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. This was just the beginning, and it was going exactly according to plan. By the time the main course arrived, a nervous energy had settled over the glass garden. The appetizer fiasco had been smoothed over with profuse apologies from the catering manager and complimentary wine for all tables. Eric had regained his composure, standing to offer a toast to his beautiful wife and the incredible family who made this celebration possible. He didn't mention me. Not even a passing acknowledgement of his sister, who had just graduated earlier that day. I caught my mother's eye from across the room. She gave me a small, apologetic smile. Too little, too late. And now, Eric continued, raising his glass higher. Jessica, and I would like to share a special moment with you all. 5 years ago, we danced to a song that meant everything to us. Tonight, we've brought that same band here to play it again. He gestured grandly toward the stage where the Nashville musicians were setting up. Jessica stood beside him, glowing with happiness as she took his hand. "This is our song," Eric announced, "and we invite you all to join us on the dance floor after we begin." The bandleader nodded, counting down. The first notes of what was supposed to be a romantic ballad began, except it wasn't a romantic ballad at all. Instead, the speakers blared, "Who Let the Dogs Out?" A collective gasp rippled through the room. Eric froze mid-step, his face a mask of confusion. Jessica's mouth fell open. The bandleader frantically signaled his musicians to stop playing, but the song continued at full volume through the venue's sound system. Someone was trying to cut the audio, but thanks to Ava's friend in A/V, the backup system had been accidentally activated. I pressed my napkin to my mouth, hiding my expression as I watched Eric storm toward the stage, gesticulating wildly at the sound technician. My phone lit up with a text from Ava. OMG, it worked. Marcus says Eric's face is purple. But the music mishap wasn't the end. As the sound technician struggled with the system, the track suddenly switched again, this time to an audio recording that was unmistakably Eric's voice. Just exhausting, you know? Jessica's constantly planning these elaborate dinners and gets so upset when I'm too tired to appreciate them. Last night, she made this complicated risotto thing that took her hours, and honestly, I would have preferred takeout. Jessica froze in the middle of the dance floor. Every head in the room swiveled toward her, then back to Eric, whose face had drained of all color. That recording had been Ava's masterstroke. She'd found it buried in an old voicemail Eric had accidentally left me years ago when he'd pocket-dialed my number during a conversation with his college roommate. I'd forgotten about it until Ava had suggested we dig through my old messages for potential ammunition. "Turn it off," Eric shouted, his voice cracking. "Now!" The recording cut out, but the damage was done. Jessica stood rigid on the dance floor, her expression a storm of humiliation and rage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. My mother rushed to Jessica's side, while my father tried to guide Eric back to the head table. Technical difficulties, the bandleader announced weakly into the microphone. "We'll take a short break." I excused myself from the table and slipped toward the restrooms, needing a moment to process what was happening. Our plan had been to create inconveniences, embarrassment, not this level of public humiliation. The recording had been a step too far, and I felt the first real twinge of regret. In the elegant bathroom with its marble countertops and fresh orchids, I splashed cold water on my wrists, a calming technique I'd learned during therapy sessions for my exam anxiety. "Quite the evening, isn't it?" a voice said behind me. I turned to find my Aunt Helen, my mother's older sister and the family's most outspoken member, watching me with knowing eyes. "It's certainly not going as planned," I replied carefully. Aunt Helen snorted, checking her lipstick in the mirror. "Your brother always did have a flair for drama. But this?" She shook her head. "Poor Jessica. That recording was brutal." "Yes," I agreed, guilt gnawing at me.
It was.
"You know what's interesting, though?" Aunt Helen turned to face me directly. "The timing of all this. Eric's perfect party falling apart on the same day he stole your thunder." My heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "Oh, please." She waved a dismissive hand. "Your parents told everyone about the conflict with your graduation. Most of us thought it was awful they didn't reschedule this shindig. You've worked so hard for that degree, Lena." I stared at her, speechless. "In fact," she continued, reapplying her lipstick, "several of us were planning to skip out early and take you to dinner to celebrate properly. Though with the way things are going, we might not need to leave early at all." She winked at me. "The party seems to be self-destructing quite efficiently." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed frantically. Multiple texts from Ava. "Emergency. Danny says there's a problem with the cake. Someone from the bakery realized the switch. They're trying to fix it. What should we do?" I quickly texted back. "What kind of problem?" "The filling. We requested garlic buttercream as a joke, but they actually did it. They're trying to find a replacement, but dinner service is ending." My stomach dropped. The cake had been meant to be the final act, a subtle alteration to the design that only Eric and Jessica would notice, a private embarrassment rather than a public spectacle. But actual garlic buttercream? That was never part of the plan. Things were spiraling out of control, moving beyond subtle revenge into something that felt mean-spirited and cruel. I thought of Jessica's face when she heard that recording, the shocked whispers of the guests, Eric's humiliation. This wasn't justice. This was bullying. As I exited the bathroom, I saw Eric and Jessica in an intense conversation near the kitchen doors, their body language tense. My parents hovered nearby, their expressions anxious. The guests murmured uncomfortably, the festive mood completely evaporated. I had wanted them to understand how I felt, overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. But not like this. Not like this at all. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator's voice cut through the awkward murmur of conversation. "It's time for Mr. and Mrs. Matthews to cut their anniversary cake." I watched in mounting horror as the kitchen doors swung open. Four servers emerged, carefully balancing an enormous 5-tier cake between them. It was a masterpiece of white fondant and gold leaf, adorned with cascading sugar flowers that matched Jessica's bridal bouquet from 5 years ago. The cake looked perfect, but I knew its secret. Another text from Ava buzzed on my phone. They couldn't fix it. "Lena, we need to stop this now." My fingers hovered over the screen, but it was too late. The cake was already being positioned on the ornate display table at the center of the room. Guests gathered around, phones raised to capture the moment. Eric and Jessica approached, their earlier tension masked by camera-ready smiles. I pushed through the crowd, panic rising in my throat. "Wait!" I tried to call out, but my voice was lost in the applause. The event photographer directed Eric and Jessica into position. Someone handed them an antique silver cake knife, a family heirloom that had been used at weddings for generations. "On the count of 3, the photographer called out. 1, 2, 3. Together, they pressed the knife into the bottom tier of the cake. As the blades sank through the pristine white fondant, Jessica gasped. Instead of the traditional white cake with raspberry filling they'd selected, the interior was a shocking bright blue. Eric frowned, cutting deeper. "What the?" The unmistakable aroma of garlic filled the air. "Is that garlic?" Jessica asked, her voice rising in disbelief. Eric dipped his finger into the filling and touched it to his tongue. His face contorted in disgust. "It's garlic buttercream. What the hell?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then growing as the absurdity of the situation set in. Someone in the back called out, "Keeping the vampires away on your anniversary, Eric?" Jessica stood frozen, staring at the ruined cake as if it had personally betrayed her. Eric's face flushed crimson. He turned to the event coordinator, who was already on her phone, frantically trying to reach the bakery. "This is unacceptable," he hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who's responsible for this disaster and fix it.
Now."
My mother hurried over, attempting damage control. "It's just a cake, sweetheart. We can still celebrate." "Just a cake." Eric exploded. "This entire night has been one catastrophe after another. The champagne, the appetizers, that horrific music mix-up, and now this? It's like someone is deliberately trying to ruin our anniversary." His words hung in the air. The room fell silent. And then, a voice broke through the tension. Aunt Helen's. "Well, isn't that ironic?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. All heads turned toward her. "What's ironic?" Eric demanded. Aunt Helen took a deliberate sip of her wine. "That you're so upset about your party being ruined when you did the exact same thing to your sister." My heart stopped. This wasn't part of the plan. "What are you talking about?" Eric looked genuinely confused. "Lena's graduation," Aunt Helen continued, unfazed by the sudden attention. "The doctorate she spent 6 years earning. The ceremony you all decided wasn't as important as this party." The room shifted uncomfortably. Guests exchanged glances. My cousins from Portland, seated at my table, murmured in disapproval. "That's different," my father interjected. "We had already planned this celebration. Deposits were paid. Invitations sent. So your daughter's achievement wasn't worth the inconvenience of rescheduling?" Aunt Helen countered. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. This confrontation, this public airing of family grievances, wasn't what I'd wanted. The sabotage was supposed to be subtle, a private lesson. Not this. "Is that true?" One of Jessica's friends spoke up, looking at my parents with disapproval. My mother flushed. "It's complicated." "It's really not," another voice called out. My cousin Rachel. "Lena's been playing second fiddle to Eric her entire life. We've all seen it." The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Some defended my parents. Others expressed shock at how my graduation had been disregarded. And in the middle of it all, Eric stood staring at me, realization dawning on his face. "It was you," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "All of it. The mix-ups, the recording, the cake. It was you." Every eye in the room turned to me. My mind raced. I could deny it, blame coincidence, pretend to be as shocked as everyone else. But as I looked around, at my parents' confused faces, at Jessica's hurt expression, at the cake that had become a bright blue, garlic-scented symbol of my resentment, I knew it was time for the truth. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It was me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But why?" Jessica asked, looking genuinely bewildered. "What did we ever do to you?" And that simple question, asked with such genuine confusion, broke something inside me. Because she truly didn't know. None of them did. They had never seen how their actions affected me, how year after year of being the afterthought had slowly eroded my sense of self-worth. "What did you do?" I repeated, a lifetime of swallowed pain rising to the surface. "You existed in a family where there was only ever room for one star, and it was never going to be me." My voice broke, but I pushed on. "Do you know what it's like to achieve something you've worked toward for 6 years, only to be told it's inconvenient? To have your moment, your one moment to shine, dismissed because your brother's anniversary party is more important?" I turned to my parents, tears blurring my vision. "Did either of you even consider rescheduling this party? Did you even try?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I whispered. The silence that followed my words seemed to stretch for an eternity. The ornate chandeliers of the glass garden cast long, judgmental shadows across the marble floor. I could feel everyone watching, waiting to see what would happen next in the Matthews family drama. My mother was the first to speak, her voice small and fragile. "Lena, we never meant to make you feel less important." I finished for her. "But you did. My entire life." My father stepped forward, his face a complicated mixture of anger and shame. This isn't the place for this discussion. No, I agreed, suddenly bone-weary. It's not. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away from the ruined cake, away from my stunned family, away from the wreckage of Eric's perfect anniversary party. My heels clicked against the marble floor, the sound echoing in the uncomfortable silence that had fallen over the room. I had almost reached the exit when I heard footsteps behind me. Lena, wait. I turned to find Eric standing there, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I never meant for things to go this far. The cake, that wasn't supposed to happen like that. The cake is the least of it, he said, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. Did you really graduate today? I hesitated, then shook my head.
No.
My graduation is still weeks away. June 10th, like I told Mom and Dad. I just wanted to see if they'd even question it, if they'd bothered to remember the actual date.
He winced.
And they didn't. No, I confirmed. They didn't. Eric was quiet for a moment, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. I never realized, he finally said, how much you felt overlooked. That's part of the problem, I replied softly. No one ever realized. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. And I'd like to be at your actual graduation. If you'll let me. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the entitled older brother I'd resented for so long. This was just Eric, flawed and human. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. He nodded, then glanced back at the chaos behind him. Jessica surrounded by sympathetic friends, my parents in deep conversation with Aunt Helen, guests pretending not to eavesdrop while grabbing their coats. You should probably get back to your wife, I suggested. I think I've done enough damage for one night. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The garlic buttercream was a bit much. That part was actually an accident, I admitted. Believe it or not. He shook his head, almost laughing. We'll talk.
Soon.
Properly. I nodded and watched as he turned back toward the remains of his party. Then I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool night air, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding my entire life. Ava was waiting for me, leaning against her vintage Volkswagen Beetle, a small cake balanced in her hands. A single candle flickered in the breeze. How bad was it? She asked, her expression apprehensive. Catastrophic, I replied, kicking off my heels and leaning against the car beside her. But maybe necessarily so. I filled her in on the confrontation, Eric's apology, and the uncomfortable family reckoning that had played out in front of 100 guests. Holy shit, Ava breathed when I finished. That's not how we planned this to go. No, I agreed. It's better, I think. Messy and painful, but real. She handed me the cake, a simple chocolate affair with Dr. Lena, written in slightly wobbly icing. For you, she said. I know it's not your actual graduation day, but it's perfect, I told her, feeling the sting of tears. After a day of elaborate decorations and expensive displays, the simple gesture meant more than Ava could know. I did bring reinforcements, she added with a sly smile, nodding toward the restaurant across the street. To my surprise, a small crowd had gathered on its patio. My study group from the psychology program, my supervisor from the university clinic, neighbors from my apartment building, even my favorite barista from the coffee shop where I'd written most of my dissertation. They waved when they saw me looking, raising glasses in my direction. What is this? I asked, a lump forming in my throat. Your graduation party, Ava said simply. With people who actually want to celebrate you. As we crossed the street, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Aunt Helen. Proud of you. Not just for the degree, but for finally standing up for yourself. Many of us are. Your parents will come around. They need time to process. Until then, celebrate your moment. Attached was a photo of her with several other relatives, my cousins from Portland, my Uncle Jim, even my grandmother, all raising glasses toward the camera. They'd left the party too, it seemed. I slipped the phone back into my purse, a strange lightness spreading through my chest. For years, I believed that being overlooked, being the afterthought, was my predetermined role. That speaking up would make me selfish, difficult, unlikable. But tonight had proven otherwise. Tonight had shown me that my voice mattered, that I mattered. As my friends greeted me with hugs and congratulations, as Ava led a slightly off-key but enthusiastic rendition of "For She's a Jolly Good Fellow," I realized something profound. I'd spent so long waiting for my family to see me that I'd almost missed the people who had been seeing me all along. "Speech," someone called out, and glasses were raised in my direction. I looked around at their faces, expectant, supportive, genuinely happy for me, and felt, for perhaps the first time, completely seen. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady and sure. "Tonight I learned something important. You don't always get to choose your family, but you do get to choose your celebration. And this," I gestured to all of them, "my chosen family. This is the best celebration I could have asked for." As cheers erupted around me, as the simple chocolate cake was sliced and shared, I knew with absolute certainty that this night, this imperfect, unexpected, wonderful night, was finally, truly mine.